We're all here in Basel, Switzerland. We're here because Dr. Albert Hofmann is turning 100 years old, and we are here to celebrate the life and works of Dr. Albert Hofmann, without whose work probably none of us would be where we are today. This is a great convention, and so many interesting people from all over the world are here. So many like-minded people who have pursued different paths, but similar paths. We have here artists and musicians, we have PhDs, we have scientists, we have doctors, we have ethnobotanists, and we have all painters and all kind of people here who have pursued really different paths, but at the same time, each person in his own way has come to a certain kind of spirituality, and it's really great to be here with so many like-minded people.
I'm honored to be here today and continue the celebration of the genius of Albert Hofmann and how his gift to the world has brought us all together.
I'd like to say a couple of things about observations about the meaning of the psychedelic experience.
These are doorways. These are drugs of transitions, drugs of building bridges, drugs of bringing to the light what's dark. And not only do we have to bring to the light what's unconscious to consciousness, I think we need to bring what's underground and illegal back into legal contexts.
Two dihydrofuran rings on either side of a ring with something down here and a chain up there. And the chain is 2 carbons, it's a phenethylamine. If it's 3 carbons, amphetamine. I love chemical structures, I call them dirty pictures, with blackboards, but I have to use my hands, and you're going to have to put up with it.
Psychoactive plants and preparations appear to be a permanent part of the picture, no matter where we look in time or location. And so the question arises, what actual role did psychedelic use play in the emergence of modern humans? And secondly, was that role merely incidental, accompanying and perhaps assisting our proto-human ancestors in a process that was happening anyway? Or might psychedelic use have been a necessary and essential catalyst to his emergence, an emergence that would not have otherwise happened?
What I've tried to do is present a little dapple of the 40-year history of bladder. And I've had to submit to certain requirements. I couldn't bring any of the blotters I have that have been dipped and ISO'd because I don't want a problem at the border. So I only brought undipped full sheets.
The important thing to understand any psychedelic experience is to know the intention, or as Leary formulated it originally as set and setting, set being intention and setting being the context that you choose for your intention. So it's a model of how you approach these substances. Just to review briefly the different, when LSD was first discovered, the first group to use it were, as Jonathan mentioned, the CIA and the military, who had the intention to see if they could find a better truth serum.
It may seem a little bit strange to think of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency as being part of an ecstatic adventure with LSD, given that the CIA was using LSD as an instrument of torture to crush the resistance of interrogation subjects. Here's how it would work. When they had a person in their clutches who wasn't giving information that they wanted, and no other interrogation technique was working, the CIA in certain cases would administer LSD surreptitiously to a person. After a couple of hours, when the experience started to hit really strong, and that person wouldn't necessarily even know, well, they wouldn't be familiar with the effects of LSD beforehand. They wouldn't even necessarily know that they had been given a drug. Oftentimes they would become very frightened. They didn't know this was a temporary experience, and the CIA interrogator would move in and threaten to keep that person in this insane, crazed state forever, unless they told them what they wanted to know. That's how the CIA, that was one of the ways the CIA used LSD operationally, albeit on a limited basis, during the Cold War. The central irony of LSD is that the same drug used by spies as a weapon to control the mind was later embraced by many others as a sacrament to liberate or expand, or at the very least to explore the mind. How could one substance serve as such disparate and contradictory impulses?
Well, here's what happened. I spent 15 years collecting, and then I said, well, I better find out what it's like, and so then I spent 15 years making it.
I see. So you actually designed some of this stuff?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I'll show you some of mine.
Some of the things you designed.
This is one of mine I did from a painting of my friend Alex Gray.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I bought the painting back in 1987 and hung on to it a while, and then made the blotter and distributed it everywhere. And then when the conspiracy was over, I got Alex to sign a number 500 of them and paid him off, you know, so he wouldn't feel ripped off.
I loved when they were talking this morning about reboundarization of the self, or deboundarization of the self. I'd never heard that term, but I thought it's completely appropriate for the psychedelic. And also, in retrospect, I see it as the arc of my artwork, that there is a kind of redrawing of the understanding of the identity of the self.
And we have the historical example of Eleusis and the Eleusinian Mysteries, a mystery religion, the dominant religious ceremony in the ancient world for 2,000 years, which most likely involved the ingestion of a kykeon, of a sacred drink, in a ceremonial context.
The Eleusinian experience was induced by the drinking of a psychoactive sacrament. Almost all of the great minds of antiquity experienced it. Some of them were quite explicit about its importance. Plato describes the experience, and he uses the experience actually as the basis for his whole philosophy. Most people are unaware of the fact that ancient philosophy was visionary experience. It was, as he describes it, an experience of leaving your body and taking a journey and seeing true reality and being changed forever after that. Cicero speaks of it, obviously he was initiated too, and he says it was the greatest gift of the Greeks to human civilization. It was a mystery because something about it had to be kept a secret. And the other part was simply that what was experienced was something that you could understand only if you had the experience yourself. Otherwise, it seems fantastic.
To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour.
I did this one for a Rolling Stone concert back in '93. But that's just the little bit of blotter. I've done many, many of these, but that's not what this is about. This is about a small little concise history. I had a dominant role in the 90s, so then you see a lot of mine there. But you turn the corner, I don't have anything here. And this is what was dominant back in the 80s. This is a fabulous, fabulous piece. It was done in 1985 in San Francisco. And if you study the bite, the machine work on it, done by the perforating machine, you will see that this piece is exactly the same as this piece of California falling off into the ocean. So these pieces are from 1985, and one's a tribute to Albert Hoffman.
Und jetzt begrüßen Sie bitte noch einmal ganz herzlich Albert Hoffmann. Du hattest ja die Substanz im Jahre 1938 schon einmal getestet, ohne Ergebnis. Was geschah im Frühjahr 1943?
Ich wollte diese Substanz noch einmal in die Pharmakologie geben, weil inzwischen seit der ersten Untersuchung 1938 neue Methoden entwickelt worden waren. So stellte ich die Substanz noch einmal her und während dieser Arbeit musste ich, war an einem Freitagnachmittag, musste ich einfach das Labor verlassen. Ich hatte das Gefühl, es passiert etwas mit dir. Ich fuhr mit dem Velo nach Hause, legte mich hin und hatte ein wunderbares Erlebnis. Eine wunderbare Gefühl. Und was immer ich mir vorstellte, irgendwie war bildhaft von mir, tief beglückend. Das dauerte vielleicht etwa 3-4 Stunden und dann verschwand das. Da habe ich mir gesagt, das muss etwas aus dem Labor gewesen sein. Das muss jetzt am Labor. Und das war am Freitag, und dann am Montag habe ich gedacht, jetzt wollen wir schauen, was das war. Und ich hatte mit einem Chloroform-ähnlichen Lösungsmittel gearbeitet, mit Dichlorethylen. Und dann habe ich gedacht, man hat ja viel eingeatmet von diesem Mittel. Und Chloroform, Sie wissen ja, ist auch etwas, das auf die Psyche wirkt. Ich habe dann Schnüffeltest gemacht, es war nichts. Dann habe ich gedacht, ja, was habe ich noch gemacht am letzten Freitag? Ich habe noch das Lysergxoridieröl mit umkristallisiert. Vielleicht ist es doch. Was mich da gerufen hat, etwas hat mich da ja gerufen. Ich habe nichts eingenommen. Ich konnte mir gar nicht vorstellen, dass es diese Substanz war, die ich da mit äußerster Sorgfalt hergestellt hatte und behandelt hatte. Und habe ich gedacht, ja, also wenn das ist, dann musst du ganz vorsichtig sein. Ganz vorsichtig. Da muss ich sehr, sehr aktiv sein. Ich machte eine Lösung und dachte dann, jetzt fange ich mal an mit einem Viertel eines Tausendstel Grammes. Und ich wusste, dass wenn es das höchst bekannteste Gift ist, macht es mir immer noch nichts. Und dann dachte ich mir, ich steigere dann langsam und dann schauen, ob da etwas wird. Und dann war das schon viermal zu viel. Und war dann etwas sehr erschreckend für mich. Es wurde erschreckend. Es kam so stark und überrumpelte mich. Und meine Laborantin hatte mich begleitet und ich sagte dann, Doktor holen. Und der Arzt kam, der Dorfarzt hat mich untersucht und hat nichts gefunden. Und es war dann wirklich ein Horrortrip. Ich hatte das Gefühl, jetzt das Ende ist da, es war eine total andere Welt. Und habe gesagt, Donnerwetter, jetzt hast du eine große Erfindung gemacht und jetzt musst du gehen. Und hast eine junge Familie. Und also es war ein merkwürdiger Zustand, andererseits ganz außerhalb der rationalen Welt. Doch konnte ich denken, ich war mir meiner Situation bewusst, ich hatte nicht das Gefühl, ich habe etwas ganz Bedeutendes entdeckt und jetzt musst du gehen. Jetzt musst du gehen. Ich dachte mir, das ist das Ende. Es war so intensiv, es war so anders. Und der Arzt hat mich ins Bett gelegt und ich war da und habe da meine Horrortrip ausgestanden und dann langsam wurde es aber besser. Und inzwischen kam eine Frau aus Luzern, wo sie mit den Kindern war, zurück und es war dann etwa Mitternacht und dann konnte ich ihr sagen, ich habe etwas genommen und es geht mir wieder besser. Und dann langsam ging der Horrortrip in einen wunderbaren Trip wieder. Plötzlich hatte ich das Gefühl, es kommt ein neues Leben in mich hinein. ein wunderbares Wiedergeburtsgefühl. Und am anderen Morgen konnte dann schlafen und am anderen Tag, als ich in den Garten ging, das war ein unwahrscheinliches Erlebnis. Und dort merkte ich, das kann man ja eigentlich, das kann ich gar nicht beschreiben, wie schön das war. Das war dann das war die Geschichte. Das LSD ist zu mir gekommen. Ich habe es nicht gesucht. Ich habe eine Substanz gesucht, die auf den Kreislauf wirkt und stabilisieren wirkt. Und es wurde ein Psychostimulans allerersten Ordnung. Und dann, also ich gab einen Bericht zu meinem Vorgesetzten, zu den Pharmakologen und zum anderen, und die glaubten es nicht. Sie glaubten erst nicht, dass das möglich war. Es ist wirklich etwas Unglaubliches. Das ist weitaus die wirksamste Substanz, die es überhaupt gibt. Und sie hatten dann selbst auch noch drei meiner Mitarbeiter und der Chef, die haben dann auch einen Versuch gemacht, aber sie nur einen Viertel von dem genommen, von dem ich einen Versuch gemacht habe. Vorsichtshalber. Und dann haben sie aber doch dann bestätigt, ja doch, es stimmt. Es stimmt. Und nun ja, damit war also eigentlich die Entdeckungsgeschichte beendet. Aber ich muss sagen, es ist rührend, wie das LSD mir sagen wollte, jetzt willst du mich wieder abgeben in die Pharmakologie und wir finden ja nichts. Und da muss er sich selbst melden. Und wenn ich jetzt sage, wenn ich dort nicht irgendwie etwas unsauber gearbeitet hätte, wenn ich es ganz hundertprozentig sauber gearbeitet hätte, wären wir nicht hier. Wäre all das LSD und die ganze Entwicklung ging ab von dem, dass ich etwas unsauber gearbeitet hatte. Also man soll nicht zu perfekt sein in diesem Leben.
Das ist doch eine ziemlich tröstliche Aussage, dass man nicht immer alles machen muss. Wie ging es dann weiter nach dem 43 intern in der Sando und wie kam es dann zu einer breiteren Öffentlichkeit oder in die Hände der Psychiater?
Vorerst glaubte man eben die Geschichte nicht. Ja, der Chemiedirektor und der Pharmakologe, die haben gesagt, sie müssen irgendwie einen Fehler gemacht haben in der Einlage. Das kann nicht stimmen. Sie haben das dann geprüft und haben dann gefunden, doch, es stimmt. Und dann sagte man, das wollen wir natürlich selbstverständlich pharmakologisch auswerten, irgendwie ein Präparat machen. Und zu diesem Zweck muss man ja eine sogenannte klinische Voruntersuchung machen, bevor man es dann in die Untersuchung gibt, an einem breiten Publikum. Und dann haben wir in der Firma, im Laboratorium, haben wir an Freiwilligen die sogenannte klinische Voruntersuchung gemacht. Und da habe ich auch mitgemacht. Und das war aber dann wirklich fast ein zweiter Horrortrip. Man wurde gefragt, man wurde gemessen und ringsherum gingen die Leute herum, so blödsinnig, da in weißen Mänteln, gingen da herum. Ich habe das Gefühl, ich sei in der falschen Welt. Wirklich, es war sehr unangenehm, diese Testerei, die ich damit gemacht habe. Und dann habe ich mir gesagt, also, das LSD, das muss ich einmal in einer anderen Umgebung erleben. Und dann habe ich mich entschlossen, wieder zu einem Versuch, und da habe ich dann den Ernst Jünger, den bekannten Schriftsteller, der dazu mal schon, mit dem ich gleich befreundet war, ihm geschrieben, ob er kommen würde, ich möchte einen Versuch machen mit LSD. Und einem Pharmakologen aus der Firma habe ich auch mitgenommen zur Sicherheit. Und dann haben wir in unserem Haus in Bottmingen, im privaten Kreis, haben wir dann für mich den ersten psychedelischen, geplanten Versuch gemacht. Ich wusste genau, wie viel man nehmen muss. Ich hatte dort nur, ich hatte 50 Gramm, ein Jünger hatte 100 und der andere Kollege auch nur 50 Gramm. Und wir waren, die Familie war außer dem Haus, aber meine Frau hat vorbereitet, schönen Blumenstrauß und wirklich eine schöne Umgebung. Schöne Umgebung. Wir wohnten in einem sehr schönen Ort, also wir hatten einen Ausblick auf die Wiese und Wald. Und die Familie ging weg, ich wollte Ruhe haben und wir drei waren da, wir drei Genossen haben dann diesen Versuch gemacht. Das war der erste psychedelische Versuch. Und das war dann wunderschön. Eben, nachdem ich das im Labor miterlebt habe, habe ich gesehen, das LSD gehört nicht in die Fabrik, gehört nicht in die Technik, das LSD gehört in die Natur.
You know, that was a long time ago and I was quite, fairly young, and I was happy that I was young enough and it was new enough because it was in the very beginning of the whole scenes and there hadn't been any bad publicity yet. And I was young enough that I had no negative expectation or no expectation at all of what will happen and no negativity surrounding that. So it was a wonderful. And I discovered things about thought and even creation, and I started to see the elements that creation is made up of and see how they combined to make matter and what we see around us, and even learn how to maybe move those things with thought and different little things like that just opened up, and it was very wonderful, and it opened up a whole new world for me.
I was in a dark tunnel and going toward the light, and it was a continual kind of spiraling through this tunnel toward the light. And for me, it seemed like all of these struggles with polarities and things were kind of united in this symbol of being in the dark but going toward the light. It put my whole mind and everything in perspective. It was like a spiritual rebirth canal for me, and it was so beautiful. And the light, I felt like, oh my, this is really, there's something transcendental that I'm going toward. And so for me, it was really like a confirmation that there is a divine reality. And I called this girl and said, wow, that was profound for me, life-changing for me. How was it for you? And let's get together and talk about it. And anyway, that was 30 years ago. And that girl was my wife, who's here today, right there, Allison Gray.
Now, the LSD story as a whole abounds with all sorts of ironies. Consider, for example, that a U.S. intelligence veteran named Captain Al Hubbard was first introduced to LSD in 1951, just when the CIA was getting involved with experimenting with the drug. But unlike his cloak and dagger compatriots, Captain Al Hubbard saw the light on his first trip, and he made it his life's mission thereafter to turn on as many people as possible. Now that is really quite a plot twister. That is not something that the CIA necessarily anticipated. We should all be grateful that things don't always work out the way that the CIA hopes.
Es war ja die ersten 10 Jahre, war es wirklich ein Wunderkind. Es wurde eingesetzt in der Pharmakologie an Patienten, die nicht mehr ansprechbar waren, die blockiert waren. Und das LSD hat sie dann gelöst. Sie konnten sprechen, sie konnten dann behandelt werden mit der Psychoanalyse. Das war vielversprechend und wurde überall in der Welt wurden diese vorbereitenden Untersuchungen durchgeführt, bevor man ein Präparat, ein Handelspräparat einführen kann.
And Leary set up a project under Harvard University, which I collaborated with. So Leary hit as one of his first application projects that he wanted to do the idea of working with prisoners in a prison to help them change their mind, their attitude, so they would be less likely to return to prison after they'd been released. So, and that would give you a behavioral index of change, which is always the thing that behaviorism was very big at Harvard in those days.
You know, the pain, how long does the effect on pain last? Just short term during the session or extended afterwards? Eric Cass, who is a pain control expert, he didn't know anything about LSD. He had never heard about psychedelics. But here was a new compound, and on a hunch, he started administering it to his cancer patients without even explaining what it was, because he didn't even know what it was. And by today's standards, impossible, could never be done. But he observed that their pain lessened, not only during the, you know, if it's psilocybin, 4 to 6 hours, if it's LSD, 8 to 12 hours. He found that their experience of pain attenuated, lessened for days afterwards, for weeks afterward. They needed less narcotic medication to control their pain. He came up with something he called a theory of attenuated anticipation, that he felt a lot of the, you know, these people were caught in a pain cycle, not only experiencing pain, but anticipating that this pain would continue and would not lessen and would always be with them. Suddenly they broke that cycle. They were able to step back, detach, and suddenly experience of pain was much less, need for narcotics much less. Fascinating observation.
As it turns out, nearly every illicit mood-altering drug that became popular as a recreational drug on the street in the 1960s, 70s, and thereafter had prior to that been scrutinized, tested, in some cases even developed by the CIA and the US Army. I'm talking about now cannabis, heroin, cocaine, barbiturates, PCP, magic mushrooms, mescaline, laughing gas, the whole gamut. The CIA looked at all these different drugs, but of all the drugs, all the substances that they surveyed, none triggered as much enthusiasm as LSD.
Dann da geschah das, was dann die Geschichte verändert hat. In den Vereinigten Staaten wurde dann offenbar von diesen medizinischen Präparaten, die ging irgendwie ziemlich viel auf die Straße. Und LSD wurde dann sozusagen die sakrale Drogen der Jugendbewegung. Anti-Vietnam, Anti-Establishment und die ganze Jugendbewegung hat da sich diesem LSD zugewandt. Und man weiß, es haben dort dazu mal Millionen haben LSD genommen.
The psychedelic movement of the 1960s and 1970s had major impacts that has not been acknowledged by most of the history books, major impacts on the Vietnam War struggle, on the struggle for civil rights for women, for ethnic minorities, for sexual minorities, for working to save the environment, and for other liberation struggles in the United States. LSD and other substances gave people a new way of looking things, a new perspective, and hastened these liberation struggles.
One of Acid Eric's masterpieces, the Gorbachev. This piece is the piece, this is the Gorbachev that broke the wall down, not the other Gorbachev.
In the mid-1960s, you had a certain institute in Palo Alto dispensing LSD to a lot of people. And they were giving it to the early, pioneers of the cyber community, the whiz kids of the computer scene. And many of these people turned on. And many of them say that they credit LSD in part to helping them facilitate their work, to push the edges of the permissible and possible was how Stuart Brand put it.
A lot of connections have been drawn between this vision and the start of the personal computer and internet technology fields and developments. Bob Wallace, a good friend of ours and funder of projects like Arrowhead and Maps, was employee number 9 at Microsoft, and he said that his interest in developing personal computers and the interest of many people that he knew in the industry that he worked with specifically came out of psychedelic experiences, that his interest in developing technology and developing, working with the internet was related to trying to manifest the visions that he had experienced and had while under the influence of psychedelics.
I mean, there was an explosion of consciousness at that time. Everything, it affected everything. Music, art, people's thoughts, people's search for spirituality, people's search for alternative lifestyles. I mean, the whole thing was like an explosion of consciousness in the 60s. So it affected every area of life in many ways.
Now, when I was researching Acid Dreams, the book I wrote, one thing I was very surprised to find was the extent to which the CIA agents themselves were taking LSD in the early and mid-1950s. Everybody in the technical service staff, this was a unit within the CIA, it was a small unit, about a dozen people. Everybody in the technical service staff took LSD, and the technical service staff was the unit that ran the MK Ultra program, which was the CIA's main drug testing program. It looked at various, not just drugs, but a wide range of different behavior modification and mind control techniques. This was the main research and development program doing this sort of thing for the CIA during the Cold War. Well, the technical service staff was not the only unit in the CIA that was working with LSD. There were several different units. And the first unit to get involved was the Office of Security. And they got kind of miffed because the technical service staff, I mean, you have to understand that LSD was really a hot item in the CIA. This provoked a great deal of excitement. And when the Office of Security saw that the technical service staff was started later than them, was sort of getting most of the action, they got kind of jealous and upset. And they had a spy start looking at from their own unit, looking at what technical service was doing. And this produced a very interesting series of documents that was sort of rather, you might say, unvarnished. And at one point, an Office of Security spy get wind of a plan on the part of a technical services agent to dose the punch at the annual CIA Christmas party in 1954. And the Office of Security guy very indignantly writes, I do not recommend putting LSD in the punch or at the Christmas party because it's dangerous and all that.
Aber es wurde sehr oft, das nicht beachtet, was man machen muss. LSD gehört eben, ja, ich sage es jetzt schon, in die Reihe der sakralen Drogen, die dann später durch LSD in mein Labor kamen, die untersucht wurden, und dort drin waren die Substanzen, die sehr nah verwandt waren, praktisch LSD waren.
Definitely, it opened up a whole world of esoteric world, higher world. I got very interested shortly after that in all kind of, first in astrology and tarot and magic, and then came into contact with Indian holy books, and then went to India and came into contact with yoga, and went and lived in the Himalayas and did serious yoga studies, and learned many, many things. And all of it, I would say, was,
So within about 24 hours, I felt like my prayer had been answered, really, because I had had a mystical experience and gotten a confirmation of transcendental reality and met God face to face. Before my psychedelic experience, I had no interest in the whole wisdom traditions and study, but suddenly now I was interested in every perspective on the transcendent.
People became exposed to it, and people experimented with it, and then it spread for a bit, and new art and new music and different things came up. But then when the journalists got wind of it and started to put it in Life magazine and Look magazine and all the newspapers, and then government started to make a lot of, once that happened, then the government banned it. So then the whole scene changed after, and it became an illegal and underground thing.
Gehört wirklich, es war kein richtiger Rahmen da. Für LSD wurde einerseits es war es ein Segen für viele junge Leute. Andererseits hat man es nicht vorsichtig genug genommen und es wurde viele Substanzen wurden unter LSD verkauft und es gab eine enorme eine Anschuldigung der Firma. Man hat gesagt, was haben Sie da in die Welt gesetzt? Ein Teufelspräparat und so. Und dann kam von der Regierung, also von der amerikanischen Gesundheitsbehörde, ein totales Verbot. Das Verbot war ja eigentlich nicht, es war ein politisches Verbot. Man wollte der Jugendbewegung ihre sakrale Droge wegnehmen. Und dann hat man ein totales Verbot eingeführt. Jeder Arzt hat Zugang für die stärksten Gifte. Auch für alle, Morphin und alles, was es so gibt. Jeder Arzt hat Zugang. Er muss die entsprechenden Vorsichtsmaßnahmen befolgen, aber er hat Zugang. Aber dort wurde ein neuer Paragraph in die Gesetzgebung aufgenommen in den USA. Ein ganz neuer Paragraph für diese Art Substanzen, die das Bewusstsein verändern. Und zwar Herstellung, Besitz und Anwendung total verboten. Die ganze Untersuchung kam zum Stillstand und die Welt hat dazu mal ja alles nachgemacht, was in Amerika passierte. Überall wurde LSD total verboten. Also ein Verbot, das nur für das LSD gilt. Und es war dazu mal ja eben so, dass Amerika war ja die Wundernation, die Wunderregierung. Die ganze Welt hat das auch gemacht. LSD ist immer noch eigentlich im Grunde genommen total verboten. Aber es hat überlebt. Sie sind ein Beweis dafür.
I hope it will evolve in a good way. I mean, definitely all of these things that they're talking about in the symposium, you see there's very serious people here and saying various serious things. And there's no reason why all of these people who are complete professionals and PhDs and scientists and doctors and psychologists, great ones from all over the world, they should be able to continue their research. Why government is just banning research?
My name's Andrew Sewell. I'm double trained in both neurology and psychiatry. I joined Harvard Medical School slightly over a year ago, and I'm working on the LSD psilocybin cluster headache study. Now, I guess the first question is, what is a cluster headache? We all know what migraines are: unilateral throbbing headaches accompanied by nausea and vomiting. Feel better if you lie down in a dark room, go away when you fall asleep. Cluster headaches are really not like that at all. The quality of the pain is much different. Whereas migraines are a dull throb, cluster headache, it feels like a hot poker is being jammed slowly into your eyeball. Lasts about an hour and then it goes away. It's accompanied by a drooping eyelid and a dilated pupil. I mean, you can't fake having a cluster headache attack. All you have to do is look at the eyes, and the pupils are unequal size. The treatment for the most extreme form of cluster headache is you drill a hole in the head and put an electrode down into the hypothalamus and just have a little trickle current. And it works 60 to 70% of the time, and the chance of dying from this is less than 10%. So if you actually consider the odds, you know, more likely than not you'll get better and probably won't die. So this guy is that LSD cures cluster headache, and he's a middle-aged, God-fearing Midwesterner who knows full well that LSD causes permanent brain damage and doesn't want to have anything to do with it. But it also occurs to him that an electrode in the brain also causes permanent brain damage, so he thinks that maybe he'll just give LSD a try. And lo and behold, it works. His cluster headaches go away, and he's furious that his neurologists have not told him this. Why are they going to do brain surgery on him when a perfectly effective treatment is available? And the reason is we didn't know about it. That's why. And the reason we don't know about it is not in the scientific literature. How do we ever find out? We have medications to treat cluster headache, verapamil and lithium. They all have kind of nasty side effects. You usually need more than one. And what they do is they suppress the headaches during the period of the cluster period. But they don't terminate the period. If you stop taking them, the headaches come back, and the thing has to kind of run its course and burn itself out in the same way it would otherwise. Whereas psilocybin or LSD seems to just stop it. Nothing does that.
Again, why colleagues of that era didn't, march on the regulatory agencies en masse and say we gotta work with these tools. That has to do with the cultural turmoil at that time. Nevertheless, these are extraordinary models, and I think a lot of suffering people could benefit enormously.
So we should take every benefit from wherever we can get it, not just blindly say this is bad and forget about it, like, you know? Maybe it's good for something somewhere. Maybe it can help somebody somewhere. It already has helped somebody. I mean, they already have helped some people somewhere. When they were allowed to do research, they saw there's many papers on it.
Now, obviously the odds are, this is kind of a long shot. I mean, people have been trying to do LSD research for 40 years and no one's been successful so far. But I'm optimistic in this case for two reasons. The first is, there are about 300 people I'm in contact with out there with cluster headaches who have treated them successfully with psychedelics, who truly believe that psychedelics have saved their lives. And they're in all walks of life: bartenders, public relations firms, radio journalism, Washington lobbyists. And if this study is turned down, they will all be very annoyed.
There's power in these things. There has been power from ancient time because tribal people all over the world used psychoactive substances in order to have communion with their gods and their givers of wisdom and so many things. And there's no reason why research into all these kind of things shouldn't continue, so that we can understand where mankind can benefit, find a benefit from these things, to use the power of these things, because there are many benefits.
Ich verstehe darin die Substanzen, die seit Jahrtausenden immer im zeremoniellen Rahmen gebraucht wurden und bei denen ein Tabu lastete. Der gewöhnliche Sterbliche darf diese Stoffe, diese Pflanzen nur gebrauchen im Rahmen einer Feier, einer heiligen Feier, unter der Leitung des Schamanen. Es waren Drogen, die deshalb diesen Schutz nötig hatten, weil sie zutiefst in den Menschen verändern. Das hat man gemerkt, dass da etwas geschieht mit diesen Substanzen, das mit den anderen Substanzen nicht passiert, nämlich, dass unser Bewusstsein verändert wird. Das sind alles bewusstseinsveränderte Substanzen. Und was ist das? Das Bewusstsein ist das, was wir eigentlich gar nicht definieren können. Wir brauchen ja das Bewusstsein, um über das Bewusstsein nachzudenken. Das Bewusstsein ist der Kern der menschlichen Persönlichkeit. Das Bewusstsein ist eigentlich die göttliche Gabe, die dem Menschen beschieden ist. Deswegen waren immer Gebrauch dieser, das Bewusstsein verändernden Drogen, waren eben geschützt. Sie konnten nur im zeremoniellen Rahmen gebraucht werden. Und das ist auch die ganze große Schwierigkeit heute. Wir haben keinen zeremoniellen Rahmen mehr. Die offiziellen Kirchen sind nicht geeignet. Es ist einfach die Schwierigkeit, wirklich den Ort, wo diese Stoffe gemeinsam konsumiert, gemeinsam genutzt werden könnten, der fehlt bei uns.
Danke vielmals.
But it's interesting to note that in the religious ceremonies of ayahuasca, the mushrooms and the peyote and the iboga, there's rhythmic singing. So there's something about the repetitive rhythmic drumming and or singing that helps a person move through an altered state, you see. The an altered state is a journey, and you want to keep moving, and it helps to prevent getting hung up or stuck or frightened or paralyzed or distracted or kind of swimming around in a state. You keep in mind you have an intention, you want to get someplace, and you want to bring something back. So the rhythmic singing and dancing and chanting and drumming is always a very significant part.
Aber der Mystiker denkt darüber nach oder erlebt das. Das Rätsel und das Wunder.
You just follow the beat. And in the end, at 5 o'clock in the morning, it's like full apocalypse, you know what I mean? And you go through the apocalypse and then come into the light. Because I was basing the party concept on initiation also. And in all the initiations all over the world, you go through the dark to come into the light. And so it's something like that in a way.
For one thing, we can look back through the sacred art traditions after having been dosed ourselves and start to recognize the common traditional sacred art cues that are pointing to the visionary worlds that we become familiar with through the psychedelic experience. And you can see these patterns in all different world cultures. We begin to recognize the same visionary worlds. There's something that just like you resonate with when you see these things. The same thing with fractal mathematics and geometry. This pictorialization of the infinite patterns of interconnectivity are what I think resonate with our minds.
I've argued that through the work of Dr. Hoffman and his discoveries in this realm of consciousness expanding substances, he's really made the connection with the most ancient sacred wisdom tradition of the Western world, namely the alchemical tradition, which is a direct lineage with the shamanic traditions, which are the oldest traditions of transformation and healing and spiritual growth on the planet, dating back to Paleolithic times, and which in the West became the alchemical tradition, and the East the traditions of yoga.
Sagen möchtest oder was du einfach, ja, was dir noch ein Anliegen wäre, es mit anderen zu teilen.
Ich möchte allen wünschen, dass ihnen das Bewusstsein des Wunders der Schöpfung offenbar wird. Denn der Schöpfer, es muss einen Schöpfer geben, den Schöpfergeist, den wir Gott nennen, den Schöpfergeist geben, der das gestaltet hat. Ich wünsche allen, dass ihnen das Bewusstsein des Wunders, dass ihnen die Sprache des Schöpfers verständlich wird. Gott spricht nicht durch Worte, er spricht durch seine Schöpfung, zu seinen Geschöpfen, die diese Sprache verstehen können. Und das sind nur die Menschen.
Gespräch, aber lass mich dich zum Abschluss noch jetzt schon fragen, was ist das Wertvollste, was LSD dir in deinem Leben geschenkt hat?
Das hat mich dann sehr innerlich hat es mir dann die Sicherheit und die, ja, ich möchte sagen, die innere Freude, Offenheit und Dankbarkeit, offene Augen und innere Empfindlichkeit für das Wunder der Schöpfung gegeben, für das ich meinem Schicksal, ich weiß nicht wem, dankbar bin, dass man, Sie haben ja gehört, wie zufällig das entstanden ist. Ich bin allen, meiner Familie, meinen Lehrern, meinen Freunden dankbar und möchte diesen Dank auch hier öffentlich aussprechen, dass ich dankbar bin, auch Ihnen allen, die jetzt mein Sorgenkind zu einem Wunderkind machen. Vielen, vielen, vielen Dank für Ihre Anwesenheit.
Lieber Albert.
Ich bin tief gerührt. Ich bin mir ja bewusst, Rosen, die Pflanzen, das sind Geschöpfe desselben Schöpfers wie wir. Und ich genieße immer mehr die Mitgeschöpflichkeit mit allem, was uns die Natur bietet. Und finde, dass dieses Gefühl der Mitgeschöpflichkeit mit allem, was lebt, sollte immer mehr in das Bewusstsein eindringen und unserem unsinnigen materialistischen Entwicklung durch Technik und so weiter ein Gegengewicht bieten und damit wir zurückkommen zu den Rosen, zu den Blumen, zu der Natur, wo wir hingehören.
My impressions of the conference, it was historic, it was a turning point for the reintegration of LSD as medicine for the soul, and the 21st century will be better for it.
My dear old friend Albert, you told us that you did not come to LSD. LSD came to you. That molecule knew what it was doing. It could not have come to a better person.
It's been an honor to meet as many of you as I have here, and to feel the warmth of the entire gathering and the great honor that we bestow on Dr. Hoffman. No amount of gratitude, I think, you know, would be great enough to express the kind of love that we have, an appreciation that we have, that you listened and heard the call of LSD and were able to bring it into the world. It is a true miracle and a gift from Spirit. I think all of us feel that, and I'm so deeply appreciative of the care that you've given to us all, and it was so much fun to paint your portrait and to think of the impact that you have made on our world. So I love you, I thank you, and from all of us, once again.
Aber ich glaube, was mir das LSD gesagt hat, mache mich bekannt in der Welt, damit man mich nicht vergisst. Und ich glaube, das hat jetzt, ich habe die Möglichkeit gehabt, Freunde zu haben, und durch diese Freunde hat sich dann die Stimme des LSD erweitert bis zu diesem heutigen wunderbaren Kongress und wird sich weiter durch Sie bemerkbar machen in der Welt. Und ich danke Ihnen, dass Sie hier erschienen sind. Alles, kann man sagen, zu Ehren meines Sorgenkindes, das hier durch diesen Kongress, ich möchte sagen, zu einem Wunderkind geworden ist.